Hi Ray, I am so excited to have you at the Screw Being Unhappy podcast. And thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Ray, you are a disabled mother of two and a writer and a poet, and in your own words, somebody's disabled wife. Can you tell us a bit more about your story?
Sure. I've been sick all my life. It was the bipolar disorder, but it hadn't come out yet. So I had like weird things going on at night and stuff like that. My parents are both writers. They met at a writing workshop. So I'm very much a product of that. And they taught me to write everything down honestly and early. And so I have like journals from when I was 8 years old. Uh, and so that's what has saved me.
Hmm. And can you tell, like you mentioned, like weird things were going on at night, and like for us, me, I have a bit of experience with bipolar disorder because I have two close family members with bipolar, but in our family, it was something we usually didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And maybe many women or men who are listening, they don't know anybody. So, like, what weird things were going on, or how did you find out something was a bit out of order, bit or a lot?
My stuff showed up as OCD. So I would bow to clocks, digital clocks, and I would sing songs in a weird particular order. And my light was never off in my room. I didn't sleep. I just prayed to God that He wouldn't kill my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I would find myself passed out just different places throughout the room. And then one day, years later, my parents were watching Oprah and they had OCD on, people with OCD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And my dad said, "No, those people are sick." And so I got no help still. And so it was years and years and years of
Mm. And
that kind
then
of.
what changed? Like, how did you eventually get diagnosed? And like, how that, like, actually knowing what is going on, how did that help you?
I finally got diagnosed when I was 18 years old. I had a suicide attempt after hallucinating and having depression. And uh, so yeah, I I tried really hard to kill myself, but I was so crazy that I couldn't. Um, but I was 18.
Mm. And like when we chatted earlier, like you mentioned that word is a really harsh place for you, but you are persistent and you are, as I said, you're a writer and a poet. So you publish your essays and poetry on a regular basis. And is there some way like how you can describe like what bipolar or the panic disorders? And you also mentioned you had some traumatic brain injury. Like how does that feel to you? Like how it makes the word so harsh for you? How difficult is it for you to navigate like the things we
Yeah.
maybe normally don't think about at all?
Yeah, every day is so hard, and I wish I was normal every day. The bipolar disorder means I'm having hallucinations, I'm having panic attacks, and that's every day. I can't think of a day where I've been like had a normal day. Maybe if I didn't have to do anything, but but that's not gonna happen with two kids. And um so there's always something wrong and it's always crazy. And the traumatic brain injury is more like blankness, like white space. And like I left a car running uh in a parking lot the windows down and everything for 30 minutes at an elementary school recently. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's bad. Um, but I don't really have anything to do with it because the worst problem is that the doctors don't agree. Like my neurologist doesn't agree with my psychologist and vice versa. And I have to try all these new meds. And then there's people like Aunt Gladys, and they're like, you had the operation 10 years ago. You're fine. And I'm like, I'm not fine. And she's like, what's 6 times 7? And I'm like, I don't know.
Mhm. And I'm kind of wondering, like you mentioned, like this happens like every day. Like you don't have normal days. So like if we
Yeah.
like how it affects like the small everyday activities, because you are a mom, you are a wife. How do you navigate like all this? Because I would say being a wife and having two kids is super hard for everybody, and especially if you like have like this extra like difficult layer, like how do you navigate all that? How do you manage?
We have game, like my kids and I have games. So we'll do puppets, or we'll do reading time, or we'll do quiet time. So we have like I have a chance to calm down, and they don't see what's going on with me. They did see me freak out yesterday and walk barefoot across a field, and they were screaming, "Mommy, mommy!" And that wasn't a good look, but that doesn't happen often. And when you Google mothers with bipolar disorder, it's a really like sad depiction. It's just really sad mothers and really sad children. And so I'm trying not to be that. I'm trying to like put my face and my kids' faces out there with the words bipolar disorder and just change it.
Mm. And how is it going? Like how are you managing to
It's
change?
going, it's good. I love it. I love having kids. I was told at 18 years old I would never be allowed to have kids. And I believed that. They said I would kill the baby.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah. And so I believed them. That's a big thing to say. So I didn't wasn't like, I don't know. Um, and then when I was 35 and married, my husband was like, when are we gonna have kids? And I was like, oh, I can't have kids. Like, I'll kill the baby. And he's like, you're not gonna kill the baby. You don't like kill snails. You're fine. And I'm like, what? And so I had to unlearn a lot of things to have my two kids, and they're my favorite things in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes it's pretty crazy, like what the doctors can say to us, like this, what it's something else. Like it's really incredible because I am no expert, I'm not a psychologist, but what I know, like that people like with like the mental disorders, as far as like they they go to their doctors, maybe they take medication, they can just function fine. And imagining that somebody told you this at 18, that's pretty
Yeah,
heavy. Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
that kind of ring the bell for me. First time when I was maybe 21, I went to Africa, and the doctor tried to give me like all the vaccination and all the medicines, and I said I don't want all of them, and she was like, okay, if you die there, it's your fault. So so the doctors, it doesn't matter if they're in the US or the Europe. I guess sometimes
Right.
find crazy doctors everywhere. And it kind of like what you were talking about now about the having kids. And I mentioned this earlier as we start chatting that like two family members in my family have bipolar, but in our family, like it's something it's not talked about. And when I asked you before the interview, you said like in your family you are open about everything, you talk about it. So, like, what would be your advice to people who either have a family member with bipolar disorder or have bipolar disorder and have kids? Like, what would be your advice based on your experience when it comes to like the talking or not talking?
Yeah, I think it's always talking. And if you're a bipolar parent, you should be telling your children it, like all the time. Tell them, like, I need more naps than other people. I take medication. I do this, but look how creative I am. Look at this poem I wrote. That's amazing. Mommy's amazing. And so they can see that there are different ways to live. Um, about other people, I would try to talk to them. I would try and get through to them, because it's such an easier thing to treat when you have more support. So I would want to be that support, and I would want to be like, hey, is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything you think about on a regular basis that disturbs you? Is there anything that I could do for you to help you? Um, I just think that's the way to live, but you can't push it on, adults.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking like if I had this kind of information when I was younger, like so many things would have been easier because like you know what's happening to the other person and you know like it's a disorder or it's nothing personal against me, but that the person is going through like mood swings and like really long periods when they are feeling really, really bad. And I
Yeah.
think it would really help. So I completely like agree that the talking is probably better option, but unfortunately I experience it the other way around. And
Yeah.
actually, this kind of also brings me to the next question I had for you. It's maybe United States is different than Czech Republic, but I feel like in Czech Republic it's changing, but it's still like it brings lots of kind of stigma and shame, and people have lots of stereotypes about people with any kind of mental illnesses, but also the bipolar. So like what was the hardest thing like when it comes to maybe stereotypes and stigma for you, and like how did you manage it?
The hardest thing for me, I mean, it's been everything. It's been my schooling, it's been my driving, it's been everything. But the hardest thing for me is being a mother and having people say that I can't do what I'm doing. I'm doing a really good job. And one of my mom's friends wrote her an email, and the email said, why do they let people like your daughter have children? And I read that and I was just so hurt by that, because she has no idea how hard it is, but also how rewarding it is and how much these children are loved. So the stereotype of a bad mother because she's bipolar or whatever the illness may be, that's the troubling thing. And that's what I'm really trying to tackle in
Yeah,
my life and in my writing.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that almost like I felt like I will start crying because it feels, you know, like what you said, like what the friend of your mother said, it feels like from some like movies about the periods when like people were admitted in the hospitals and like you know it's still like this is still happening and it's really sad that like it is still happening and that must be really tough. Yeah. So, so I wanted to actually ask, and you mentioned it now that's what you also try to tackle in your writing and poems. Like most of your poems or essay, like what do you write about?
I'm writing a lot more essays from my podcast. They're funny. I think they're funny. And I write a lot of about nature. I write a lot about my kids. Um, my mom, both my parents are writers, like I said, but my mom always wrote about her tragedies. So her mom died when she was 16 and it haunted her. And she spent her whole life, the rest of her life, she's almost 80, writing about it. And I have a deep respect for that because that's what I want to be like. I want to have like my troubles and then like sit down with them and share them and help somebody else.
Mm. Yeah. Because writing, I mean, I'm no, well, I don't consider myself a writer, even if I write some articles for a couple of Czech magazines and stuff like this. But I think it's really helpful. Like even like I always have a journal, and I don't do it regularly, but I always kind of write notes and what, especially like the fact that like whatever you are experiencing, you want to share it with others, like to help them. Like that's what I really believe in, because when I
Yeah.
started coaching, or it was more mentoring, I was supporting women in intercultural relationship, and I got a couple of hates like from older women telling me like, you are super young, like what you are advising other people about. And my response usually was like, well, I kind of wish you as an old lady would share with us your experience so we can learn, but because you are not doing it, we have to do it ourselves. So it kind of feels like something you are trying to do as well.
Yeah.
And did you like, do people get back to you on your essays, or did you hear some of these like stories, how it helped other people, like what you wrote about your own experience?
Yeah, I get messages through Facebook or Instagram or my email because that's public, and they're just like, thank you for writing this. I couldn't write it, but I needed it to be written somewhere.
Mm.
And that fills my heart with joy. That's a great experience.
Mm. I think sometimes like just kind of learning that what we are going through, it's not unique, that other people are going through it, and most importantly, they are managing to go through it in some kind of grace. I think
Yeah.
that's already like super helpful.
Yeah.
And because I mentioned like I started as a relationship mentor and coach, so I was kind of interested in knowing like bipolar and all the challenges you are dealing with in your daily life. How does it affect your marriage, your relationship with your husband? And it was nice to meet him before we started.
Yeah. Isn't he nice? Um, he is a saint. He my uh disorders have increased over time. So I've gotten worse, and he's had to adjust to that. And he's done it. He does it. Like when I walked out in the field yesterday, he just said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Panic attack." And he just hugged me really close and he said, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And he's just a real mensch in that way. He's just a fantastic person. And I'm very, very, very lucky. I also do not have to work. Um, he works, um he supports all of us, and it's amazing that he can do that, and we get the children we want from that, and we get the life that we want from that, and that's all him. He's building a big building. He's
Hmm.
doing something special.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And because like maybe also talking about the stereotypes, like what I heard usually, that like people like with the bipolar, like it brings lots of issues to the relationship. So it's good to hear that it's manageable, like the same way as you are completely fine and capable of taking care of two children.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
exactly.
Ray, I have a couple of questions because the Scrubbing Unhappy show it's for other people to get inspired. So I have a couple of questions I usually ask all my guests, so the people who are listening can get inspired as well, because that's what I think is amazing about meeting other people, having conversations, and kind of try new things. Because I believe that if we want things to work for us in life, we just need to play an experiment and see what works for us. So I'm curious, what lifts you up when you are like down?
It sounds so dumb, but it's my children. It's I there is no other answer. I just go over to them, and even if they don't want to hang out with me, I start like pacing around them and making weird noises until they're giggling. And then like I rub their tummies and then they're giggling again. It's just that's like that's peace. That's peace.
Yeah. And it's not dumb. It's not the first response I get on this question that is
Yes,
children.
I'm
So
sure. I'm sure. I wish I had like a better one, but I
no,
can't help it.
another guest, Jade, he was saying she doesn't have kids herself, but she was mentioning like the kids of her sister. So I guess it works with any kind of children because
Yeah.
ultimately they are pretty amazing human beings, right? Very different from us adults. So yeah.
Yeah.
And who inspires you and why?
Who inspires me? There are a lot of people who inspire me. Um, my mom, as I stated, inspires me just because was unpublished for 18 years. For
Mm-hmm.
18 years, she sent out her work and they said no, 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 no. And then she got accepted. And then she got accepted somewhere else. And then she got a book deal. And then she got this and that. And my mom is amazing. And my dad is amazing too. He's always writing. He's always been a big part of the poetry community where we live. So I just look to them. I don't have to look far.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your mom's story because it's when I started doing business, I never thought I would be doing business. I thought I will always have the job with a salary, so it was all new. And then you keep hearing this story like the only thing you have to do to succeed is not to quit. And you hear these
Yeah.
stories kind of on Instagram and on Facebook and wherever, but like actually meeting somebody who is like the real life example, like it's amazing. And 18 years, like that's a long time, and that's super inspiring and like giving hope, I think, to all of us who are trying to do something like that. Like if you do not quit, it works out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing. That kind of make me smile. And one more question I ask all my guests, because I say that as a coach and I try to do it also with the podcast. I believe that if you listen to podcasts or you read a book, it can be inspiring, but it won't change anything unless you do something. You do some action and you kind of act on what you are learning. So if there is one thing you would want the women and men who are listening to the podcast, one thing you would want them to do after listening this podcast, what it would be?
It would be to go to my website and find Aunt Gladys. Aunt Gladys just means an ableist person. It could be a woman or a man, it doesn't matter. It's all like you disguise them, but you write an art like a little article or a poem or whatever, and you show Aunt Gladys be the bad guy she is. And in that way, you take it over. And plus, it's usually pretty funny because usually these people are doing really weird things. So we can laugh at them. We can laugh at this whole idea of this ableist person telling us we're not good enough or we're not great enough. We're not smart enough. We're not sane enough. And so I would write an Aunt Gladys.
Okay, and it's interesting to learn like new name. Like I didn't hear this one yet. Like I hear
Oh,
the
Aunt Gladys.
judge. Yeah, then my former coach used to call her Scarlet. So all the noise, like so this is a new one, like that kind of
Oh,
voice which tells us we are not good enough, we are not beautiful enough, we are not smart enough. And
right.
yeah, and that's one thing we all have in common as human beings because we all have owned Gladys or Judge or Scarlet or whatever you call it, the inner critic. We all have her, him, whatever. So it's super important to stop listening to them.
Totally.
And you mentioned your podcast as well. So can you tell us a bit more about your podcast? What do you do there?
Yeah, I'm doing essays about mental illness, and I'm having everybody who is on the channel, the what is it called? That's everyone who's on the podcast is disabled. So
Mhm.
they're writing about disability too. Um, and I think it's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah. And so it's called Odd and Glorious podcast.
Yes, odd and glorious.
Okay. And when we were chatting, like when we were discussing what to talk about on this episode, so you said you can talk serious things, you can talk like
Yeah.
crazy things, you can talk funny things. So when
Yeah.
it comes to one of your stories, or maybe one stories of your guest on the podcast, like what is your favorite, maybe funny thing to say?
Um, I like that I had an Aunt Gladys interaction in which I was having a panic attack in public and I had no medication whatsoever. And then I was like hyperventilating a little and she said, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm having a panic attack. Oh, I know why. It's because we took this car. It's because we did this. It's because of this. It's because I feel like I'm a bad mother. It feels like I should be replaced with an able-bodied woman to raise my children." And I just dug deep and I was like there, like spewing my guts out. And then I just looked at her and she looked at me and she said, "Tomorrow I'm going to buy a watermelon." And I was like, "What? What? And I'm like, "That's perfect. That's a perfect Aunt Gladys." So I like that
Yeah, that was like what? Like which watermelon?
one.
No, but I like actually the way you were describing how she was talking, and it's I mean it's pretty like what our inner thing, whatever we call it, on blood is tell us. It's really brutal. Like we would never say it to other people, we would never say it to anybody, but we say it to us, and like almost on a daily basis, like how many times a day we criticize ourselves. So it's kind of, I didn't expect we will talk about this on the podcast, but it's good that you brought it up because I do it a lot with my coaching because we all deal with this BS from our inner critic, and it's so important to stop listening to them. Do you have some trick how you stop listening to Aunt Gladys, or she just ends up with watermelons pretty much?
When I believe her. I believe every word she says until she says something like watermelon. And then I'm like, "Oh, you're actually crazier than me." Like,
Mhm.
never mind. And
Okay.
then write about it. And then my husband's like, why are you writing about my kid, this person or this person? I'm like, sorry, dude.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like it actually, like to realize that that person is like more, as you said, more crazy than you, like that they are just talking nonsense and like why we should listen to them. Yes,
Totally.
I think that's a perfect ending to this show. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your personal experience with us. It was really interesting and inspiring, and I hope people who are listening learn something about themselves or their friends or relatives. And Ray, thank you for so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Yeah. And yeah, like anybody who is listening, go out there and check the Odd and Glorious podcast. I'm going to do that myself as well. It sounds super, super interesting. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.